If you clicked on this video because you think this task will make you rich, you're in the wrong video. Hi everyone, welcome to Talk and Chalk. I'm Beck. I'm an assistant principal in Southwest Sydney, and thank you to all of my new subscribers or my new followers. If you've found me on social media, then I'm glad you're here. I'm really excited because there's only 5 days left of the school term for me in the system that I'm in, and then I get to go visit my parents on holiday. And I'm also looking forward to the upcoming conference that's on Friday the 13th. If you're going, you know what I'm talking about. Today I'm going to be talking about rich task learning, and I have my trusty notebook with me with a few pages. However, I'm sure I'll get through the points pretty quickly. So just to remind anyone, if you haven't already, my subscription button is below. I've also got in the description my links to all my social media. I only share educational stuff. I don't spam and I don't sell. I'm just sharing. I share because sharing is caring. Sorry, I think I'm counting down to the end of term and now I'm just too excited. So what I'm going to go through is what rich task learning is, what it involves, what the benefits are, and then I'm going to give you an example of one that I did years ago. And unfortunately, I lost all of my resources for it because it was all digital, and it was when I changed schools and it was on the server and then I couldn't access it. It was a whole kerfuffle. But I'm pretty sure I remember most of everything I did so that I can at least talk to it. Just means I can't share any of the resources with you, but these would be easy to do. So let's get into what rich task learning is. So you can see on here, I've got my little definition written down because I don't want to miss any points for you. So please excuse me as I read. So rich task learning is a project that connects different subjects. It's interdisciplinary, so cross-curricular, and involves a variety of teaching and learning methods. Students display their learning throughout the task. It is not only about improving one's understanding, knowledge, and skills. It is equally about how they display their progress. The project should spark interest, relate to real issues, and help students develop useful skills. It must promote active learning, and it should be flexible. So for most of us who have been in the system a while, we've touched on this before. It's been around a while, so I guess I was sort of introduced to it at uni. The language was there, and it wasn't until I had been teaching a couple of years that it was really sort of something I really had a good grasp and understanding of. Anyone who's new to the system now know this more as project-based learning, PBL. They're kind of the same thing. I guess it just depends on what research or methodologies you're using as to your understanding and the sequence that it can provide and how it can be formulated. Very similar though. The end goal is the same. So when you're looking at the topic of your project for rich task learning, it should be interesting, interdisciplinary, draws on widely accepted topics in subject areas. So for example, we know that, work is in a community as a normal unit. Perhaps your project pertains to something like that. It integrates social, linguistic, and cultural practice. It connects to the world. It's used flexibly to address local issues. Doesn't have to, but it can. And it has elements that would otherwise be difficult to access. So when you're thinking of those standard units that you have in your classroom, you need to be thinking that this project will create a connection that is otherwise not there. So I'm just flipping to my next one. Apologies, I know it's rude for me to do this, but I want to make sure I get the language right. So the characteristics of rich task learning, it should be problem-based, should be challenging, involve active thinking and doing, encourages originality and invention. It requires judgments, as in making judgments, not us of the kids, they're making judgments throughout their learning process. It supports their learning goals, whether it's individual, whether it's class goals, whether it's cohort related if it's your grade or stage. Has a variety of communication skills. It's ethical and respectful of the learner. Now, all of this, like I said, because it's interdisciplinary, cross-curricular, means that you're still having those curriculum outcomes embedded in it. And depends on what you're doing, whether it's going to cross 2 subjects, 3 subjects, or all of them. This means though that it still requires assessment. This is the different ways that you can assess those kids, and you can have those different levels of assessment, assessment for or assessment as. So the assessment needs to be meaningful. Assessment from rich tasks is richer and more complex than a standardized test. It represents an educational outcome of demonstratable and substantive substance. It's realistic decisions and articulation of choices. That's the students making those decisions and being able to articulate it. And it has self-reflection and self-assessment over time. So it's not just that end goal, that one thing that they're doing and then they reflect. They're reflecting on all of those learning opportunities that they have throughout the project. What makes it rich? This is the good thing. So what makes it rich is the environment in which it's presented. That comes down to you as the practitioner being able to provide that environment for the students. And it doesn't necessarily mean finding a fancy pants environment to do that in. You do it in your own classroom. It's about that organic environment, that natural environment that you can create in that classroom for them to be able to openly engage with the rich task. The nature of the learning activity, the roles that the learners are encouraged to adopt, making it multi-dimensional. So it's got more than one learning experience or outcome. When you think of a standard project, you know, information on the pyramids, it's just that cardboard thing with information, like an information report on the pyramids. That's one learning task. That's it. That's not necessarily a rich task activity. And opportunities to demonstrate knowledge, skills, and understanding. The demonstrate part, the sharing of their understanding, their sharing of their knowledge, being able to convey that in a way that suits them, that they feel confident in doing that. So there's different ways you can do it. So what are the benefits of this? Ultimately, high engagement and motivation. There is research to back this up. There's evidence to back this up. And if I remember to do it, I'll link some readings below, all my links in the description. It's authentic and it has real world applications. It transcends learning in isolation. Our subjects are still taught in isolation. Well, not all of us, you know, some of us are doing it across the board, project-based learning, STEM, that sort of a thing as well. But the whole idea behind the rich task learning is that it's taking that project and making sure it's not just an English project, not just a science project, which means that they can make connections. It means that they can take that learning and put it into application, put it into practice. It raises level of attainment, again, research proven. It fosters critical and creative thinking. It promotes discussion and collaboration. It's easy to differentiate, and it allows for inclusivity. This means that all of our students should be able to access learning, access the curriculum through this style of learning. So I want to tell you about my example now. I've done this various ways, but this one example that I always give, whether it's just at random PL or whatever, and we're talking about stuff like this and it comes up, everyone's always said to me, that's so cool, that would be easy to do, and I could do that too, and I could do it with any grade. So that's why I want to share this one with you today. So I did this in, I'm counting back the years, 2008. Yes, it was 2008. And I had a year 4 class. The students wanted to raise money for a class party at the end of term. I didn't even plan this out. So this rich task came to me when the kids started talking about wanting to raise money to pay for a class party at the end of term. They didn't want to bring in money. They didn't want to bring in food. So they wanted to do a pizza party at the end of the year, and they were talking about a way that they could raise money for it to be able to do it. I know kids don't make that connection that even though they're bringing a gold coin in for something, they're still technically paying for it, but hey, it engages them. And it gives them that sense that, you know, you contribute to something. So they were talking about selling cupcakes, you know, cake stalls, that sort of a thing, doing a different fundraiser. But ultimately, you know, we're talking about year 4. So there were, I can't remember if there were 3 or 4 year 4 classes. I was in a big school at the time. So we were trying to think of, you know, how much we would have to raise to be able to pay for it. They had to, you know, put that into sort of a way that they could all understand and be able to plan around that. And somewhere along the line, it turned into, let's have a restaurant. Let's have a restaurant for a day. And this is where I saw a really good opportunity. I went, well, hang on, a restaurant is a lot of organization. You can't just, you know, put some tables and chairs out there and start selling stuff. You've got to, you know, put things into gear. So this is when I started planning and formulating and putting into action all of that research and everything that I had been doing on rich task learning. And I don't know, it just all came together really well. So that was a term unit that was going to become my term focus for the kids, that they would get to have their restaurant at the end of the term, about week 9, so that then we would have the money to be able to use for the party the following week for all of year 4. So I told all of year 4 that I would be doing this to plan for that day, and be prepared in case it failed and we would have to do something else. So I tied it into everything. So for creative arts, here's my little list again. So they had to do things like designing a logo. So we had to research logos. So we looked at macros, we looked at slogans, we looked at, colors, we looked at, logos throughout history. We looked at ones that were, hand-drawn, things that were made by computer. There was just so much graphic design involved in it. Eventually they had to, design a class logo. They decided that they wanted to do a Halloween themed restaurant. So then we looked at, creating Halloween decorations. I didn't want to have to go to the shop and spend a ton of money on this. They'd have to make it themselves and design it themselves. So they had to design what would be something that we could hang up in that space, because we eventually realized that we couldn't do it inside. We'd have to do it outside for the amount of kids that we had coming. How are we going to display things? If you want to make cardboard cutout headstones, how are you going to make them stand up near the bushes? Because they're not just going to be able to sit there. We can't stick things on the brick wall outside. Lots of problem solving involved in this. They wanted to play music while people sat down and ate. So we had to talk about, what music is appropriate, what fits in with the theme, where are we going to source the music from? Because, this was before we had so much access to, YouTube and iTunes and everything else. We had to find CDs and borrow copies and copy things. So that was creative arts pretty much for the term. In terms of performing arts, the kids had to role play. So they all took on roles. They had to decide who was going to be the chef, who was going to be the people serving, who's going to take orders, who's going to be the, the host or hostess at the front that's going to sit them down and play out that character. They had to be able to say the lines, "Welcome to our restaurant. Let me take you to your table," or "Can I take your order, please?" They role played this stuff out, and they made costumes as well. So they made little chef's hats, basic things, cardboard, strip around the head with a printed chef's hat. They had to go online and find these things. And this is before we had lots of computers in the classroom, before we had the iPads in the classroom. So we had 2 standalone computers. So some of it was just lots of clip art that they found and then put into Microsoft Word. And then we had to print and then measure and adapt and figure out ways to fix it. And they had to make, so some of them had jackets if they were the people serving or taking orders. The chefs made themselves little aprons as well. All of that played into it. English. So much English involved in this. So we looked at advertisements, advertising, how do you advertise? What's your audience? What are you trying to convey to them? How much information goes on it? What colors do you use? How big is it going to be? Is it portrait, landscape? Headings and subheadings and all the grammar that goes in that. Also looking at recipe writing. They wanted to cook this stuff themselves, not just go to the shops and buy random things and put it out there. They actually wanted to cook and to make things. So we learned how to write recipes, and we learned how to adapt recipes, reading the whole formula that goes into it. Menu writing. So we went and got a ton of takeaway menus from other restaurants, and we looked at, brochure folding and how they're laid out. Entrees, mains, desserts, why does it go in that order? Why are prices different? Why are they laid out the way that they are? And we looked at something, just have the basic leaflet as opposed to the fold out menu. And why is it different to the menu that you look at? So, McDonald's is an easy one. What does the menu look like when you go into McDonald's? It's up on the board. Can we do that? No. What else can we do? And then they had to decide the best way that they wanted to write the menu. Now, all of this stuff, kind of goes with independent first, and then they can pair up and group up and then decide as a whole class how they're going to do this. And this is where all of that conversation, that dialogue, that problem solving, interpersonal skills really plays into it. Great communication. They also we looked at food reviews. So we read a bunch of food reviews and, how many stars they got out of 5 and what does that mean and what kind of language do they use, because there's lots of, in between the lines sort of reading when you read food reviews and, what does that actually mean? And just so many adjectives to describe food and the way it tastes or smells or feels. And especially because it was a Halloween one, they wanted to do stuff that was kind of scary and kooky and crazy. naming the items as well. So we looked at heaps of wordplay, you know, funny ways to describe what you're doing. So they decided that they wanted to make sandwiches in the shape of coffins. So, you know, how are you going to make a play on words for coffin sandwiches or sandwich coffins or something like that? And they had lots of different ones. But that was good to be able to see them apply that to it. And then mathematics. So we had to look at calculating the cost of our items. So, you know, getting out catalogs, Woolworths catalogs and things like that, and calculating how much it would cost to make the sandwich, the coffin sandwiches, and how much can we charge for it. Now, I wanted to keep this as simple as I could overall. So ideally I wanted 3 prices, 50 cents, $1, $2. I think that's what we stuck with. So we had to pick, would the sandwiches be a 50-cent item, a $1 item, or a $2 item? And they had to calculate that and figure out what was worth it, because ultimately we didn't want to make a profit. Well, I guess we did kind of, because we needed to pay for the items, and then we wanted to raise money for the pizza party. So we had to think too, how much is the pizza party going to cost, because that's how much money we want to make. And they had to calculate all of this. They needed, so working with money, understanding money, you know, converting money, being able to make predictions with those numbers, basic problem solving. And I tied this in with maths as well. So there's lots of problem solving around money and around shops and around restaurants and food, just to tie in with it. They had to calculate their seating. So they had to draw out maps of the seating arrangement where the tables and chairs and everything would go, had to go out and measure the space and then measure the tables and measure the chairs and see what would fit, and then modify those arrangements to see how they could best make it fit, so they could also fit in their decorations as well. Tons of measurement with that. And then also looking at, you know, we looked at weather too, you know, predicting the weather and the temperature and how that would all play into it. Such great conversations came out of it. And then ideally we really tied it in with HSIE, Human Society and its Environment, for anyone who's not in the same system as me. So looking at workers in the community. Who are the, you know, the people working in our restaurants in our community? Do we know them? And some of our parents were people who had restaurants in our community, or at least worked in them. Looking at our local businesses and how we support each other, how we work as a network, and how that advertising can help each other out, discounts and bargains and shopper dockets, and then looking at employment and business prospects. So, you know, how do people get paid for the work that they do when they work in restaurants and do things like that? So when it came to restaurant day, so this was over the whole term, all of these things coming together. So year 4, the whole grade came sort of one class at a time, and they were greeted by a host or hostess in their jacket that said, "Welcome to our Halloween restaurant." I can't even remember what the name of it was now. And they sat them down, and then we had our people who were serving coming out to take the orders with a little notebook and wrote it down, and they collected the money in a little tub. They went into the classroom, which was where our chefs were preparing, and in there they would come and prepare the food. So sandwiches were already pre-made. There was someone in there making fairy floss in one of the little things that you can buy, and they called it witch's hair. So it was witch's hair on a stick. It was just fairy floss. We had jelly with like gummy worms coming out of it. It was all very unhealthy, extremely unhealthy, and totally worth it. And they sold everything. So when those kids were finished eating, the next class would kind of come, and the servers would kind of have to go and say, "Thank you for coming today. We're packing up now," and they'd clean away the tables, and then the next class would come in. Now they raised enough money not only for a ton of pizzas, there was leftover pizzas, they also managed to get enough for drinks and for ice creams as well. They were so proud of themselves. And those other year 4 kids, even though they weren't part of the whole planning and creating the restaurant part, they loved being part of it, just being people in the restaurant, being the consumers of the products. They really enjoyed it. So we went to the year 4 restaurant today. It was a Halloween restaurant because they had the kooky music going and everything, the creepy haunted house music and stuff. They loved it. There was so much ownership over this learning, and they could talk about it. And my kids were talking to the other kids about how, oh yeah, we wanted to put the table over there, but it just wasn't enough room, so we had to put it over here. Yeah, that table that you sat at, yeah, that's the one that I moved. Little things like that. And I could see them applying it in other areas, all those measurement skills, all those writing skills, all those creativity elements and communication elements were really working in other areas as well. They really took it upon themselves to go, this is a skill I have now, I can apply this in other areas. The kids loved it, the teachers loved it, great feedback from the parents, great feedback from my boss at the time as well, who came over and visited while we were there. And the kids were even talking about how when they're older, what kind of a restaurant they're going to have, you know, that entrepreneurial thinking for the future, that, you know, that idea that I don't just want to work in a restaurant, I want to create one, I want to own one, and I can change it the way that I want to. So I get a bit excited when I talk about the restaurant because it was just so good. And it was, I guess it was still fairly early-ish in my career. I'd been teaching, 2008? So I'd been teaching about 5 years at that point. I was coming off the beginning teacher sort of title and feeling really confident to take on new things and be challenging and push the boundaries. So, and the fact that it was successful and everyone loved it just means that I was so much more proud of it as well. So I'm going to leave it there, though. I won't ramble on forever. I would love to hear about any kind of rich task learning or project-based learning, that you're doing. I'd love to hear more about it. Share it in the comments below. Send me a message on social media. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. The positive feedback is always good. And if you want to share this with anyone, that's always more than appreciated. I'm going to put my button down here, though, in case you haven't subscribed. You can just hover over that and click to subscribe. I'll put one of my other videos at the top there. Keep tuned into the channel. I'm not sure if I'll do a video next week with holidays starting and me being away, but I will make sure I'm updating. Thanks, guys. Bye.